Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Emily sighed and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. There was irritation in her eyes. She delayed as much as she could to avoid burdening her husband. Stephen tried again to convince her that she was right. But the thing was, she didn't think his opinion was right, and she wasn't about to give up. Emily looked at her husband and quietly said, "You do realize that I will not change my opinion." Stephen squinted his eyes and replied, "Well, I still have hope that I can convince you to do as I say." Emily shook her head. "No, Stephen, it's useless. I love you very much. I respect you. I appreciate you. I listen to your opinion. But in this case, you can't change anything. I really think I need to do just that." Stephen irritably got up from the couch and walked to the window. He sighed heavily and folded his arms across his chest. Looking out the window, he said, "Sometimes it seems to me that you and I are so different that our paths are diverging every day." Emily stood up and walked over to him. "No, Stephen, we're not different. It's just that we differ in some things. I don't think it will be such a serious obstacle in our future lives. Is it so bad that we'll be working in different places? Personally, I don't see anything wrong with it. Yeah, maybe we won't have the same shifts, but it's no big deal. I mean, not overlapping. I'll only work during the day, and you can be gone nights, days at a time. Isn't that just a schedule mismatch? Yeah, it means we might not see each other at all for days at a time. Emily, that's nothing to you." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, honey. Lots of people live like this, and we can." Stephen replied angrily, "No, I will never understand you. You choose to treat poor old people and poor people. It's incomprehensible. You'll have to treat the homeless too. Don't you understand that? How do you volunteer for this?" Emily put her arms around her husband's waist and held him close. "But you yourself said poor old people and poor people, and who will help them? Who will operate on them? Who will save their lives if not me? You chose a different path. I don't judge you, but you don't judge me. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to communicate. Maybe you want us to break up. And if I failed you so badly?" Stephen realized that their fight could go on for a long time, so he slowed down. Maybe she would change her mind later. Maybe she would admit that he was right. He put his arm around his wife and said, "No, of course not. I don't want to break up with you. Okay, you got it. I won't discuss it with you again. Just promise me one thing. If you realize you're unhappy with something, if you realize you're wrong, you'll tell me right away. I'll make it right. My love, and you will work with me. I understand. Promise me, or I won't leave you alone." Emily smiled indulgently and replied, Okay, darling, I promise." But she thought to herself that it would never happen. They had met in their freshman year of high school. Both were the children of ordinary parents. Only persistence and aspiration for a better life gave them the opportunity to get into the best medical school, where not everyone, even with money, can get in. Emily was born in a small provincial town. Her parents were not rich. Sometimes they could barely make ends meet. They were very surprised by their daughter's declaration that she wanted to become a doctor. And not just any doctor, but a surgeon. She was 9 years old at the time. From that age, the girl never changed her mind. She gnawed the granite of science, absorbing all the information she could find. Read a sea of books from libraries. A great deal of time was spent in the reading room. There she studied books that were only in a few or single copies. She was able to pass the exams at school without tutors, and then went to another city to enter the institute. And she succeeded the first time. Her parents were shocked, but the girl was not. She knew that she deserved it, and that she would continue to do the same to make her wish come true. Stephen's situation was somewhat different. He had not dreamed of becoming a doctor since childhood. In his dreams, he was a successful businessman, actor, deputy. Only by the age of 16, he decided that the profession of a doctor can bring good money. Surprisingly, he easily passed the entrance exams to the institute and entered the same faculty as Emily, so they began to study in the same group. They liked each other from the very beginning, but they didn't start dating right away. Emily was too preoccupied with her studies to spend time on romantic dates. She spent all her free time studying, writing, digging for new information. It was only after 6 months that she and Stephen began to communicate more closely. This happened after the two of them were assigned to do one lab paper. They were studying at Stephen's house. He lived in an apartment, and Emily marveled at how convenient it was to study when you didn't have 3 other people living in the same room. Stephen's parents were ordinary people, too, but the boy had grandparents who spared no money for their only grandson. They paid for his rented apartment. After that lab work prepared together, they began to communicate closely. And at the beginning of the second year, Emily moved out of the dormitory and moved in with Stephen. Now they lived as husband and wife. It must be said that Stephen benefited from his acquaintance with Emily. After entering the institute, his enthusiasm was slightly diminished. He had already started regrets that he chose this profession. The path of a doctor is thorny, and to succeed, you need to study for a very long time, and even specialization. And you need to gain experience to achieve something. And to get a good and lucrative position, you need acquaintances. But when she and Emily became a couple, the girl made 100 reasons why he should become a doctor. And one of the main arguments was that Stephen was born to be a surgeon. Stephen did not understand why Emily was so sure of this, but her words gave him much more confidence. They graduated with honors, and then their opinions diverged slightly. Stephen met Rick, who was the head doctor at a private clinic. And with the help of this man, Stephen decided to continue his residency training in plastic surgery. Emily wanted to become a neurosurgeon, and that's where things got misunderstood between them. They started fighting about it all the time. Stephen convinced his girlfriend that she should choose plastic surgery, that it would give her the opportunity to secure her future, that she would be able to earn as much as she wanted. But Emily was of a different opinion. She wanted to work in a regular hospital to save the lives of people who urgently needed help. Their arguments led to the fact that they even broke up for a while. Emily was already working part-time at the same hospital at that moment, so she was able to rent a small dorm room and moved out from her boyfriend. And they stopped communicating. Each went into residency where they had planned to go. Both were hurting because they loved each other, but neither of them wanted to give in to the other. And both knew it. Each was waiting for the other to take the first step toward reconciliation, but neither of them took that step. And then they met by chance in a cafe and considered it a sign that fate was giving them a second chance. They did not even ask each other to apologize for the hurtful words they had spoken during their last quarrel before parting. They just recognized that they were very unhappy without each other. So Emily moved back in with her boyfriend. And when he proposed a month later, she accepted. It was a very small wedding, or rather, it was hard to call it a wedding. They just signed, coming to the registry office, in ordinary clothes. And in the evening, they had a small party in a club in a close circle of friends. One weekend, they went to her parents to notify them that they're married now, and the other weekend to his folks' house. And the grandparents confessed that they had an apartment that they had bought especially for their grandson a long time ago. And this apartment was in the city where they went to school. Stephen was so overjoyed. He had not expected such a gift. His grandparents had been saving money all their lives, and from the sale of the dacha plot, the money also went to buy an apartment. Now the newlyweds had their own place. The apartment was small, but it was a great progress. Now they had their own house where they could do whatever they wanted, and it was the most wonderful time. Each came to terms with the other's choice of profession. The apartment was slowly becoming like a cozy family nest. They stopped fighting, and after finishing his residency, Stephen was going to work in a private clinic. From the very beginning, the guy realized that without the right acquaintances, he will not make it in life. Therefore, meeting Rick opened the door to the world where he wanted to shine. Of course, a specialist, he was young and inexperienced. But Christopher saw that the surgeon had great hopes, that he was very promising and motivated. Of course, Stephen talked to him about his wife, and Christopher promised that he would think about getting Emily a place with him. And there was a place for her too. But then Emily stood up to him. She said that she only wanted to work in a regular hospital, and that this was the only way she could gain experience and become a highly qualified specialist. You know, I can only gain experience if I operate on everyone all the time. What's a private hospital? It's a different kind of money, and the pay is different. But I can't gain experience there. There I will have one operation a day or even a few days, and in a regular hospital will be a stream. You realize that? No, I won't go to a private hospital. It's out of the question. They argued about it for a long time. And today they didn't have the energy to argue anymore. Stephen realized he couldn't convince her. She had to come to the right decision on her own. 5 years passed. Stephen had a successful operation in a private clinic. He was capable and quick on the uptake. And Emily was right. He was born to be a surgeon. Emily, on the other hand, was still working at the city hospital. Of course, all 5 years they were completely immersed in their work and spent very little time together. Stephen could go on vacation at any time. If he needed a few days off, he just gave notice in advance, and no surgeries were scheduled for that day. Emily, on the other hand, had a lot of trouble with this. In 5 years, she had never taken a vacation. All the time something was in the way. Then it was necessary to work for a colleague. Then a blockage in the hospital. Then urgent operations that required the presence of a neurosurgeon. But the girl didn't complain. She was so enthusiastic about her work that she was ready to live in the hospital. Sometimes she simply forgot that they had arranged a date with her husband, that it was their wedding anniversary, or that they were supposed to go to a friend's house for a holiday. And Stephen was starting to get angry. His patience was running out. He didn't feel like he had a wife, not even considering the fact that Emily did nothing around the house. Stephen had already put up with it. They just had a housekeeper, and they ordered food from a restaurant. But they began to communicate so little that they became very distant from each other. Stephen was the only one who felt it. Emily was fine with it. She was so immersed in her work that she did not notice how she and her husband became distant from each other. One day, Stephen offered to take home a romantic dinner. Emily vowed that she would not be late and would not forget. It was their wedding anniversary, but Stephen did not bother to remind his wife. It was something he was sure she would remember. Stephen ordered delivery from the restaurant, bought a fancy bouquet of flowers, and an expensive bracelet. He was anticipating a pleasant evening that would end in bed, and they could chat about something distracted, not about work. However, Emily did not come at the appointed time, did not come, and after 2:00 did not come at night. And in the morning, Stephen, angry and disgruntled, went to work, and his wife never showed up at home. And the most frustrating part was that she didn't even call to warn him. Of course, Stephen was no fool. He realized that something could have happened to his wife, so he called the hospital to find out when his wife had left. But he was told that she was still in the hospital and that she had 2 emergency surgeries and that she would probably be busy until morning. And Stephen realized that Emily had not only forgotten about their anniversary, but that the romantic dinner had slipped her mind as well. He arrived at his clinic in the morning and locked himself in his office. He had 2 consultations scheduled for today. The first one wasn't due until 200, but he purposely got into work early so he wouldn't have to face his wife if she got back from the hospital before he left for the munchies. Thinking about his worthless married life, he was drinking coffee in his office when there was a knock on the door. He glanced at his watch. No one should disturb him because his workday had not yet begun. Still, he answered it with irritation. "Yes, come in." And when he saw who entered the office, he was at a loss for words. The girl was so delightful looking, as if she had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Stephen immediately appreciated the quality of the surgical procedures the girl had undergone. Only a surgeon could understand what exactly she was changing in herself and in what way. She wasn't very tall, but her figure was. Okay, the proportions were so perfect. And Stephen suspected that there was some rib removal involved, though he couldn't say for sure. He immediately wanted to touch her with his hands and to feel her waist, her rib cage, to make sure he was right, but the sight of her breasts made him forget about everything else. The white semi-sheer blouse left no room for imagination. He could see not only her underwear, but also the skin of her breasts underneath. He felt his heart begin to beat faster. This was what it was like to almost never see his wife, though his wife couldn't compare in beauty to this angel. The girl shook her mop of red hair, licked her lower lip and said, "Stephen, you are right." Stephen felt that the day promised to be very interesting. If this was his potential client, he would be happy to have an unscheduled consultation today. The wrinkles in his forehead relaxed, and he smiled politely at her. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you? You wanted to make an appointment with me for counseling. Then you should have contacted the receptionist first. However, if you have a situation that requires urgent intervention, I can see you right away as an exception. I'll make an appointment with the receptionist. Then we'll schedule your next appointment. So, how can I help you?" The girl smiled and walked confidently to the table. Then she sat down in the chair and put her foot on the leg. Stephen had a beautiful view. "Oh no, I didn't come to see you. I just came to meet you," she said quietly. Stephen was surprised. This had never happened before. Was he so famous that his admirers were sneaking into his office? Or is she hoping he will be won over by her and give her a free operation? No, this girl is beautiful. But you have to make your position clear right away to avoid a lot of problems later. "Listen, girl. Camille. My name is Camille. Camille, if that's what you prefer. But I prefer just Camille." Stephen frowned slightly. There was something familiar about that name. Camille. Oh my God. Oh my God. Is that you? Christopher, yours. The girl smiled, and her smile seemed to Stephen so nun-like and meaningful. "Yes, and Christopher is my father." Oh, that's all Stephen could say. The head doctor talked a lot about his daughter. He loved her madly, and she was his only child. His wife died when she was only 4 years old. Rick had many women after her, but he never tied himself to the formal bonds of marriage again. His daughter grew up with babysitters. She was very spoiled. And after school, she wanted to live in Europe. She didn't want to study anymore, and following in her father's footsteps didn't seem like such a bright prospect. She just lived in Europe and had fun. And now she came back to live in Russia. She was bored, as Christopher said. Stephen did not take Rick's daughter seriously, according to the chief's words and stories, but now he's very surprised to see her for real. The chief never showed pictures of his daughter. Yeah, Stephen had no interest in her appearance. That Camille turned out to be so beautiful was a great surprise to him. "I just got back yesterday, and I came to see my dad today to check out the clinic. You know, Stephen, Dad's told me so much about you. I've met a few surgeons in my life, and I really wanted to meet you. Maybe I'll have to have surgery with you." Stephen shook his head slightly. "First of all, Camille, just call me Stephen. And secondly, I don't see any need to operate on you. You don't have any problems. You're perfect." Camille laughed, and Stephen got goosebumps. Even her laugh is adorable. "First of all, Stephen, just call me Camille. And secondly, thank you for the compliment. You're a real gentleman." They talked for about 10 minutes, and Stephen realized that he really wanted to get to know the chief's daughter. He invited her to have dinner with him, and Camille gladly accepted. And then she left. Stephen remained in his office, rubbing his hands together and smiling. Well, it was going to be a wonderful evening. No one would be waiting for him at home anyway. His wife would forget she had a husband again. Half an hour later, he got a call from Emily. "Darling, I'm sorry about last night. You see, 2 people were brought in. There was an accident, and they needed surgery right away. I just couldn't call. My cell phone was dead, but I instructed the nurse to call you. I didn't find out until this morning that she forgot to do it. Honey, I'm sorry. I know yesterday was a big day for us. I remember everything. And my present is at home. I asked the nurse to give it to you, but we were so tired, no one could think straight. I'm sorry, darling. I'm ready to make it up to you. I took a vacation. Honey, I'm taking a vacation, and I'm ready to spend all my time with you. How would you feel about that? You can take a vacation, right? Maybe we could go somewhere. Take a vacation. Maybe you want to go abroad. I'd do anything. If Emily had told him about the vacation before Camille came to his office, Stephen would have jumped at the idea. He would have had 2 counseling sessions and gone home. He would have had a polite conversation with the head doctor's daughter, and that would have been the end of it. But Emily was late. Camille had a meeting scheduled for tonight, and he wasn't about to cancel it. Unfortunately, darling, I have an important appointment tonight, and I can't cancel it. I'm sorry, but I can't, and I can't take a vacation right now. We have European colleagues flying in, and I have to devote time to them. I don't know how long it'll last. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month. So you shouldn't have taken a vacation. We won't be able to spend time together anyway. I'm sorry. Emily was very upset. She turned off her cell phone and sat on the couch, looking at the bouquet of flowers on the table. She had felt for a long time that they had grown distant from each other. But it wasn't their fault. It was the way circumstances had worked out. They'd known this would happen, and they assured each other they could handle it. But yesterday, Emily realized that they were on the edge, and that if she didn't take action, it would be too late. After the night's surgeries, she reported to her bosses that she was either taking a leave of absence or quitting. Her family was more important to her than her job, so they gave her a leave of absence. They said she could rest as long as she wanted, but only to come back to work because they could not find a better specialist. And now it turns out she took a vacation for nothing. What's she needed for if she can't be with her husband all the time? Vacation. Well, a couple days will be enough for her. And then she'll be bent over, not knowing where to put her energy. That's not good. We've got to get Stephen to take a week too. And they should spend it just the 2 of them. She misses him so much. And so did he. She was sure of it. Stephen spent the rest of the evening wondering what he should do. Cancel his meeting with Camille and go home to his wife, or to spend the evening in pleasant company with the beautiful daughter of the chief physician, ignoring Emily. He hesitated until the last moment. But when he saw Camille enter his office, who had changed into a seductive dress for the sake of dinner with him, all doubts disappeared. Camille had that promising look that told him he would not regret going to dinner. She smiled at him like he was the only man on earth as he helped her out of the car outside the restaurant. She squeezed his hand as if she never wanted to let him go from her. And Stephen realized that there was a ray of light in his life that promised him many exciting things, and he was not mistaken. Camille became his mistress that very evening. After dinner, they went to her house, and Stephen spent a wonderful evening in the company of the beautiful daughter of the chief doctor. It had been a long time since he had had such a good time. When he got home late that night, Emily was already asleep from exhaustion. She had not even woken up when her husband arrived. Stephen could not sleep for a long time. He lay there smiling, thinking about the new entertainment that had burst into his life in such an unexpected way. Now he would not be bored and dreary, and no more need to wait for his wife in the evenings, for his evenings would be taken up by Camille. At the clinic, everyone knew Stephen was married, and everyone realized that Camille was getting too close to him. But he was a respected doctor, and no one was going to pry. To Rick, he said that there had been a rift between him and Emily for a long time. There was just no way they were going to make the divorce official. Therefore, the head doctor did not worry that his daughter could get into an unpleasant story with the squabbles of resentful spouses. Besides, he didn't mind having a son-in-law like Stephen. If he divorced his wife and married Camille, Christopher would only be happy with this arrangement. Stephen continued to see his mistress every day, not only in the clinic, where Camille came ostensibly to see her father, but also outside the clinic. They often visited all kinds of public places, trying to behave in public, but most of the time they spent at Camille's apartment. And then they relaxed. So sometimes we'd lock ourselves in his office at the clinic. It was so exciting. Stephen was fully immersed in his new relationship with the beautiful Camille. Emily, on the other hand, was bored and homesick. For years, she was finally free from work and surgery and couldn't spend an hour with her husband. He would leave early and come back late. He was tired and busy all the time, and she didn't know what to do. She wondered what else she could do to get her husband's attention. She spent a few days in beauty salons, completely renewed her hair color, had a haircut, visited a beautician, tidied up her hands and feet, felt better and more confident, and decided that she should go to his clinic to distract him from consultations. He told her in the morning that he only had one consultation, and then he would be in his office all day working on paperwork and case histories. Emily decided it was the perfect time to visit the clinic. In all the years he had worked there, she had never been to the clinic before, not even to a single corporate event with him. No one's ever seen her there, unless her husband showed her picture to someone. But no one would recognize her anyway, because she had completely changed her image in the last 2 days. Emily arrived at the clinic at the receptionist's office. She asked where Stephen's office was. "I'm sorry, but he's only available by appointment. We're in the middle of an appointment for next month. Unfortunately, the first half of the month is booked up. I'll make you an appointment for the end of the month. Is that okay with you?" said the receptionist, smiling politely. Well, Emily shook her head and smiled politely too. "I'm sorry, but I'm not here to make an appointment with him. I need to find out where his office is. I need to see him in person, and right now. He's at his desk. Right now." The receptionist frowned. "I'm sorry, but he can't be reached right now. Stephen is very busy. Patients wait a long time for an appointment, and you expect to see him right away. Unfortunately, that's not possible. He's very busy." "Well, I think he'll find some time for his wife," Emily said calmly. The girl opened her eyes wide, opened her mouth, but for a long time could not say anything. "Are you the wife? I'm sorry, am I understanding correctly? Are you Stephen's wife?" the receptionist asked, confused. Emily just nodded at her. Then the receptionist looked fearfully toward the hallway, and then she did. "And he, Stephen, knows you have to come. Honey, just tell me where his office is, and I'll go to him so I don't take up any more of your time." Emily was beginning to lose patience. "I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm confused. Just where is his office?" "Oh my God, I'm sorry. Go right, then left, and then on the second floor is office 213. Emily shook her head reproachfully and went in the direction indicated private clinic. The administrator sat such that you want to immediately turn around and leave. Who works like that? This is medicine. It should be clear and to the point. And this girl bleats like a sheep. When Emily reached room 213, she smiled. Now she had another task to convince her husband to leave work and go to dinner with her at a restaurant. Then she would seduce him at home, and they would have a wonderful night. She opened the office door without even knocking. Emily entered the office with a smile, but froze in place at the threshold. Stephen was not alone. He was sitting in a chair behind his desk. In front of him stood 2 cups of coffee, a coffee pot, and a vase of candy. And next to the chair was another smaller chair, and in this chair sat a girl of marvelous beauty. This girl had one hand on her husband's shoulder, and in the other hand she held a candy, which Stephen held out on the card. In this pose they were caught by Emily. For a few seconds, everyone stood frozen in amazement. Then Emily stepped fully into the office and closed the door behind her. When she looked at Stephen again, the girl had already taken her hand away from him. The pretty girl had defiantly put the candy that was meant for Stephen into her mouth. "Emily," Stephen finally said. He was slightly pale, but his face didn't look worried. "Hey, what's going on here? I thought you were working." Unsure, Emily said. Of course I'm working, but I need to eat, so I thought I'd grab a coffee. Emily looked carefully at the red-haired beauty, who looked at her with a challenge. I see how you work. You're my husband's patient, I guess. She asked the Camille girl. She was, naturally. She didn't answer anything. Stephen stood up and walked over to Emily. Emily, it's not very convenient to barge in, just like that, into my office. Why did you come? Why didn't you call? I wanted to surprise you, and here I am. And then Emily got all horny. She realized that the pretty girl's defiant look could only speak of one thing. She was claiming her husband too. You'd better go. I'm busy right now. Camille and I have some paperwork to go over. Camille, who's this? Dr. Surgeon. Emily asked her husband. Emily, please, let's not do this. Camille, she's a specialist. What do you care? She's helping me now, and we have to finish the job. Don't embarrass me. She's already embarrassed you by working at the usual hobo place that only employs idiots and nutjobs who are obsessed with helping other people. Emily almost choked on her own saliva. What's going on here? Who is she, and why is she talking to her like that? Emily pushed her husband's hand away and stepped closer to the stranger. How dare you? Who are you to talk to me like that? And what right do you have to be here and during my husband's working hours? Camille got up from the chair, leaned with her hands on the table, and putting her gorgeous breasts in a pharmacy-leading blouse forward, said, I have every right, because I am the daughter of the chief doctor. And my father asked me to help Stephen with the documents. Emily looked carefully at the girl, the daughter of the head doctor. Is that what she is? So that's what her husband does at work. He has other entertainments here. That's why he doesn't rush home every day. He's doing well here too. My dear, you'd better get out of here. Didn't you know wives aren't supposed to show up at their husband's work unannounced? Yes, darling, didn't you? And there might be an unpleasant surprise she didn't need to see. Well, that's the situation you're in now. But I don't want to tell you anything else. Although if you're so stupid, you might not realize it right away. Why don't you go back to your hobo house? You've got your patients waiting for you, the poor beggars, who need you to save their worthless lives. In this clinic, everyone does real work that makes money, not gray hair and wrinkles. Yeah, the black eyes that you couldn't hide under your thin, I'm sorry, bitch, Emily said quietly with hatred, looking at Camille. Camille turned away and sat down in the chair again. Only now it was Stephen's chair. She put her foot on the leg, showing that she was the boss. Emily stared at the girl for a few more seconds and then turned to Stephen. He was looking at her with anger. Why did you come here? You ruined everything yourself. Emily felt a lump of tears roll up to her throat. Before she could cry, she asked her husband why. Why are you doing this to me? Did I deserve it? Stephen waved his hand irritably. Do I deserve it that you ignore my requests to work here with me? That you're always ending up in your worthless hospital? That I don't see you 24 hours a day? That you forget our meetings and romantic dates? Did you even remember until now that you had a husband? Do I deserve all this? So don't ask me anything. This is all your fault. But it's my fault. I love you, Emily whispered softly. Well, then you don't love me enough. If you keep working in this bum shop that takes up all your time, go home, then we'll talk. I think it's pretty clear. There are only a few details left to talk about. Emily looked once again at Camille, who was smiling contemptuously, looking at her, and then Emily turned around and almost ran out of the office. The door behind her closed. The lock clicked. That was it. Stephen had left her behind. Emily didn't remember how she'd gotten home, only to find herself within the walls of her home, which were now a stranger to her. She had not cried once before. She had never cried like that in her life. She had lost patience, but she had never sobbed so bitterly. Her life was ruined, but she didn't feel guilty about it. She lived by her conscience, and no one could reproach her for doing anything wrong. ridiculous accusations of her husband and his mistress that she works in a bumhouse. That's low and mean. Can a person who has dedicated herself to medicine say that to another doctor? Didn't she save people's lives? Doesn't she have people thanking her for that? Don't her colleagues respect her? Why would Stephen betray her? Only because she chose the path she thought was right for her. Can this man be called beloved? Did he deserve to make her cry for him? But she still sobbed for a long time, mourning her ruined family life that she wanted so much to mend. But it could no longer be resuscitated. She tried, but it was too late. They had gone their separate ways from the beginning. And then it was just the beginning of the end. And now that end has come. Emily must accept that nothing can be saved. Accept it and move on. When Stephen came home, he expected Emily to make a scene. But all she said was that they needed to get a divorce as soon as possible, and then said she would move in with a friend while she waited for the divorce. Stephen shrugged his shoulders and said nothing. That's how their married life ended. They were soon divorced. They had nothing to share. They each had their own money. Stephen was not going to give his ex-wife his hard-earned money. Emily had no claim on them. She didn't need it. She only took her belongings, laptop, and medical books from the apartment. After moving in with her friend, Emily began to think about what to do next. She realized that she didn't want to be in this town anymore. She called the hospital, telling them she was quitting. Oh, how upset the supervisors were. They both begged and threatened and persuaded her not to quit her job. But Emily didn't want to work at that hospital anymore. You could say Stephen had gotten his way. The memories of their separation were too unpleasant. And the words of her ex-husband and his mistress, that she was working in a bumhouse, did not let her go for a minute. Emily felt that all this would turn against her, and she wouldn't be able to be a good doctor in this hospital anymore. This place would constantly remind her of how she had been abused. Emily called a friend she went to high school with. Evelyn had moved to another city after graduation. There she studied to be a programmer and stayed there to live and work. She became successful very quickly, bought an apartment and a car. She helped her parents by sending them money. But Evelyn never found a family. Sometimes they corresponded with Emily. Often they talked to each other. But there was still a warm relationship between them. And Emily knew that Evelyn would always come to her aid if she needed it. And so it was. Evelyn said she would wait for her at her place. Emily gathered all her will in her fist and left forever from the city where she was so happy and unhappy at the same time. Evelyn met her at the train station. She hadn't changed much. From high school, she was still the same shaggy and scruffy, and dressed like a teenager. Colored sneakers, different colors, socks, bright, short nails, dreadlocks, and a damn belly button that peeked out from under a short top. Evelyn, you're irresistible. I know you are. But your friend looks like shit. I'll tell you that. Evelyn retorted. Emily grinned bitterly. Life's taken its toll on me, but I'm fine, almost fine. I just need a fresh start. I hope you can help me with that. Evelyn, I don't have anyone else to ask for help. What's the problem? A friend? You know you can count on me. Stay with me as long as you need. I've got plenty of room. I bought a huge apartment for a reason. I thought they'd have a family, but they didn't. At least you'll ask me about my loneliness sometimes. Okay, let's go. I have to run to work later. Evelyn's apartment was really huge, and the girl lived almost always only in the kitchen and in her bedroom. And there was a huge hall, another bedroom, and a gorgeous loggia with a view of the sunset. And it was all on the 15th floor. And a fool would understand that Evelyn earns very well, but does not know how to use money. She bought an apartment, a car, and that's it. Nothing else to spend it on. Well, maybe I'll have a baby someday, and he'll get it all. What's a husband for? They're nothing but trouble. There are lovers for health. I advise you to do the same. I don't think you'll ever want to get married again. Evelyn said. No one can stand my work. Evelyn, I've already realized that. Emily replied quietly. For a couple of days, Emily just did nothing. Most of the time she sat on the loggia and looked outside. Comfortable couch, table soft. Whatever the walls are declared artificial ice. The beautiful lighting, all of this was calming to Emily. And in a matter of days, she gained the strength she had squandered during her family's collapse and divorce proceedings. She felt ready to move on, leaving all the worries and problems behind. The girl went online and found the major hospitals in the city. Yes, there was plenty of room to spread out here too. She hoped there would be a place for her somewhere. And she found one at one of the city's major hospitals. The pay was no more than what she'd been getting before, but she was happy with it, starting her life over. Nothing else mattered. Oh God, somebody help me, the guy's sick. Please call an ambulance. Somebody help. Emily woke up from her thoughts. She was sitting on a park bench when she heard cries for help. Immediately, she jumped up. She threw her ice cream on the pavement and rushed away. Where had she heard the screams from? In a minute, she was already at the fountain, near which a crowd of people had gathered. Many people were shouting. Some tried to rouse the guy who was lying on the asphalt. The guy was making strange movements with his hands. It was like he was trying to scratch his throat. His lips were open and his eyes were dilated. Emily immediately realized that the guy was choking. There was no time to ask what had happened. That would take precious time, and the guy didn't have any. Emily quickly ran up, shoving everyone and yelling loudly to stand back. Hey, you guys, grab him under the arms and lift him up, hold him on both sides. Two sturdy guys picked up the man lying on the ground, lifted him up. The guy's head snapped to the side. He was unconscious or out of breath or dead. There was no time to guess. Emily went over to the guy and wrapped her arms around him. Then with all her strength pressed him on his stomach 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the guy made a weird noise. A round candy popped out of his mouth, blocking his airway. The guy started coughing, trying to catch air with his mouth. Breathe, boy, breathe. Come on, good boy, good boy. That was Emily's way of saying, lightly slapping his cheeks. After a couple minutes, the boy was able to breathe. He was fine. He was still poor, but his cheeks were beginning to crush and his lips were no longer blue. Slowly, the witnesses to the incident began to disperse, and Emily was the only one left with the guy. Thank you. I would have suffocated if it weren't for you. He whispered quietly and wrinkled his nose. Because it hurt to speak. Yes, you probably would have, Emily answered honestly. Looking at him, there seemed to be nothing wrong with him. And Emily decided he didn't need her anymore. Well, take care. I gotta go. The guy shook his head. No, I'm not letting you go anywhere. You're my visitor. I owe you my life, and I owe you thanks. Emily grinned. Saving people is my job and my responsibility. I'm a doctor, so you don't owe me anything. That's it. I have to go to work. But the guy grabbed her hand firmly. What's your name? Emily wanted to pull her hand out and walk away silently, but politeness wouldn't allow it. She figured if she told him her name, she'd be off the hook. Emily Marquis of Angels. The boy said quietly. She wrinkled her nose at that comparison, which she hadn't liked since she was a child. Gently, she removed the guy's hand from hers and quickly walked away. She was really already late for duty. The guy said something to her, but she couldn't hear because he couldn't speak loudly. In the middle of the shift, the nurse came into the resident's room and said, Emily, there's a man asking for you. I told him you were busy, but he insisted, said he wouldn't keep you long. Emily frowned and walked out. She walked to the duty nurse's station and saw Jesus. It's that guy from the park. What are you doing here? She whispered quietly as she approached him. I wanted to tell you my name. My name is John, and I wanted to ask you out on a date. Emily. John pulled his hand out from behind his back, and in his hand was a long scarlet rose. Emily blushed and looked around. The ward staff pretended not to pay attention to them. Emily took John under the elbow and led him towards the exit. Nice to meet you, John. Thanks for the rose. I'll take it. But I'm not going on a date. I don't date. I don't have time. What are you doing following me around anyway? What are you? A maniac. Get out of here, or I'll call security. And I don't want to see you here again. Emily took the rose, pushed the guy out, and walked back to the resident's office. She thought John wouldn't let up, but he didn't follow her. Emily walked into the resident's room, looked at the rose and sighed. A flower of gratitude. Nice, but nothing more. She took a glass, poured some water into it, and put the rose in it, then went on about her business. In the morning after duty, Emily drove home. Already approaching Evelyn's house, she saw a familiar face from afar. Emily frowned and came closer. Are you following me? Crazy. You have nothing better to do. I was just helping you in the park. I told you it was my responsibility, and now you're following me. I'll go to the police, I promise you. John looked at her in bewilderment. Then he saw the rose in her hand and smiled slightly. Emily blushed that she was the one acting like a young girl. She is about to turn 30, and she blushes at the mere sight of a young boy. I see you really like the rose. You're carrying it around with you. I'm not following you. I live here, John said. You live here in this house, and I live here, but I've never seen you, said Emily, confused. Maybe we live in different entrances, and I usually walk that way. Maybe that's why we've never met. Emily realized that John lived in the entryway. On the other hand, at home, what an interesting thing. We lived next door to each other and didn't know it. Okay, I'm sorry I snapped at you. You're probably in a hurry to get to school, and I'm holding you up. I'm sorry. I have to go now, Emily said. John frowned. To school? You think I'm still studying. But darling, you're flying to me. I'm not as young as you think. I graduated 10 years ago. I'm a computer programmer. If you need any help, I'm happy to help. No need. I have someone to help me. I have a friend who's a programmer. I'm right next door to Evelyn. She'll help me if I need it, Emily answered. Immediately, her tongue twisted. Why is she telling him all this? John laughed. Now I know where you live. Now you won't hide it from me, and I'll make you go out with me. Emily opened her mouth in surprise. What do you mean? What do you mean? John squinted slyly. There's no such coincidence. I know a girl who works in the same department as me. Her name is Evelyn, and she's a programmer. And she lives in this building, which means she's your friend and you're staying with her. Well, that's interesting. Emily, I don't remember Evelyn's apartment number, but I've been to her place a couple times to drop off a flash drive, and I'll remember visually. So expect me to visit. All right, run home. I hope to see you soon. And John went about his business. Emily watched him for a long time. Wow, she thought he was just a boy, but he was her age. In the evening, Emily asked her friend about John. She grinned. Yeah, I heard about how you saved John's life. He told the whole department that he met a marvelous doctor who saved his life. Yesterday he was all ears, and today he told me it was you, Emily, and I'll tell you what you're in for. Oh, honey, John is very driven and persistent, and he gets what he wants. I'm afraid if that's what he's after, it's no use resisting. I've seen his eyes light up. Is he really attracted to you? Emily rolled her eyes. Oh God, just what I needed. An unexpected suitor. I don't need this right now. I don't need this right now. And what did you tell him about me? He's all over you. Evelyn shook her head. No, he didn't give anything away. He said he'd find out all about you himself. He said you'd tell him yourself. Yeah, you wish. There's nothing else for me to do. Like be his friend and tell him all about yourself, Emily grinned. But everything turned out exactly as Evelyn had predicted. John started coming to their house every day and bringing flowers. Soon, Emily's whole room was filled with flowers. And if at first they were just single roses, then they were already large bouquets. And every day the bouquet became more and more gorgeous, and there were more and more flowers in it. and Emily finally gave in and agreed to go out with him. When he came to pick her up, Emily didn't recognize him. John was dressed completely differently. There were no youthful jeans, no brightly colored t-shirt, and no sports jacket. He didn't look so young now. And Emily was glad to herself that she had worn a classic black dress. Of course, no other dates were going on. So officially, Emily had little time for meetings. She worked a lot, so he often met her after work, then took her out for a bite to eat. And then she stayed the night. She felt wanted and loved for a long time, and she hadn't felt this way before. And when she met the sunrise on his loggia in the morning, she had a feeling that life was starting to get better, and that things were still going to be very good. When she told Evelyn that she was moving away from her to John, her friend laughed that the dawn on his loggia was better than the sunset on my side. Evelyn, stop it. You realize this is serious. I wouldn't just take that step. In 6 months, he's won me over. I can't resist anymore. I want to be with him. He's been asking me to move in with him for a long time, but I've only just realized that I really want to. Did Evelyn mean what she said? Yeah, I'm just kidding. I can see that things are real between you two, and I'm glad you found your happiness. You came to me, so exhausted and miserable, and now you've blossomed. That's because you have the right man by your side. He loves you, and I wish you happiness. Emily was embarrassed. She tried to turn it into a joke. You make it sound like you're giving a toast at a wedding. Don't be ridiculous. We're just going to live together. But Evelyn answered her very seriously. Believe me, the wedding's just around the corner. You'll see. Emily said nothing, but thought to herself that she would never marry again. 3 months later, however, she was forced to admit to Evelyn that John had proposed to her, and she didn't even realize how it had come about. But she said yes without hesitation. Emily simply realized that she wanted to be with this man forever. And this man isn't intimidated by the fact that she's always missing work. He's just looking for any way to see her, even if she's on call. She's never had that with Stephen. All she heard from her ex-husband was recriminations and accusations. John was the complete opposite of her ex-husband. Emily didn't want a big wedding, and she didn't have enough friends to organize a big celebration. But she had plenty. John had friends, relatives, acquaintances that he wanted to see at his wedding, and John wanted it to be grand. Emily didn't contradict him. If she wants it, she'll get it. She didn't really care. A very expensive restaurant was planned, and the dress was bought in an expensive boutique, and all the jewelry was donated by John. Emily didn't buy it or order anything. She didn't even realize he had so much money. Yeah, I have a lot of money. Can't you tell? Well, I didn't really need it, but I made good money. I didn't have anyone to spend it on anyway, but now I have someone to spend it on, and I'd love to spend it on you. My love. Emily shook her head reproachfully, but only kissed her husband. There were so many strangers at the wedding reception that Emily's eyes widened. She stepped away for a moment to fix her hair in the restroom. As she did, she came upon an imposing man standing near the hors d'oeuvres table. He had a glass of champagne in his hand. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you," Emily said politely. The man grinned and replied, "You don't need to see anyone but your husband right now. I am very glad that John has chosen such a wonderful wife for himself." "I'm sorry, I don't know you," Emily replied. "I don't know you personally, but I've heard that you're a wonderful doctor and that you're a neurosurgeon." "That's true. Yes, it's true. But I don't know who you are. We've met before." "No, we haven't met. I'm Uncle John. My name is David. I'm very pleased to meet you and Emily. And I'm delighted that you've become my nephew's wife. I hope to be able to make a deal with you." Emily looked around for John, but did not see him nearby. "What kind of deal?" "I don't know what you mean." "What do you mean? And why?" "John never told me about you." David began to speak in a serious tone of voice. "You see, I'm not a doctor, but I own a chain of private clinics. Several of them are located abroad. For the most part, I work for Russia there. I visit very rarely. My nephew and I haven't spoken in years. He resents me because I didn't come to his father's funeral once. John and I used to be very close, and I just couldn't make it. And John resented me for that. I tried to reconcile with him several times, but he refused to talk to me. His mother called me and told me he was getting married, and she told me about you. I was very interested in you and decided to fly to the wedding even though I wasn't invited. I want to reconcile with John and make you an extremely interesting proposal, which I hope you won't refuse. An offer. What kind of offer? I need a new chief of staff at the clinic, and I'd like you to be it. I know you're very passionate about surgery. I need a neurosurgeon, if you want one, and some of the surgeries will be yours. I'm giving you two choices, chief of medicine or neurosurgeon for a salary. Don't worry. Whichever you choose, your labor will be more than well paid. You'll be able to provide for your future children. I'm asking you to think about it. My clinic is equipped with the latest and most modern operating room equipment in perfect condition. If you need anything, just say the word and you'll have it. It's every surgeon's dream, and I need you. And you'll have a great opportunity to continue honing your skills. It's a blessing to operate under the conditions I'm offering you. Emily felt a sense of excitement. In any other case, she would have refused the offer. She had never betrayed her principle of operating on those who needed it and not charging money for it. But she felt she could come up with something interesting. I won't even think about it. I'll accept your offer, and I'll only be a surgeon for now. But I have one condition. What's that? David asked businesslike. Emily took in more air in her lungs to express this condition in one breath. I want the clinic to operate 4 times a month on poor or disadvantaged people who don't have money for surgery, who don't qualify for a quota, or who have to wait a long time for surgery in a regular hospital. I want them to be located, treated, and operated on at the clinic absolutely free of charge. When Emily said this, she realized that no one would go for that. And now this man would just laugh at her. But David looked at her carefully and answered briefly, I think 2 times a month will be enough. Okay, I agree, Emily said quickly, before that strange man changes his mind. David took a full glass of champagne from the table and held it out to the girl. Let's seal our deal. We'll exchange contacts and we'll meet in the next few days to discuss the details. Emily took a sip of the champagne in amazement. How had it all worked out like this? Had she really agreed to this adventure? And what would John say when he found out that she had made a deal with his uncle, with whom he hadn't spoken in a long time? After 15 minutes, she pulled John aside and told him everything. John had already seen his uncle. His mother told him that he had come uninvited. When he saw his wife's eyes, he realized that she was very enthusiastic about the new idea. John, do you realize what this means? Your uncle's letting me do some surgeries for free. It means I can help people who desperately need it. That's great. No private pay clinic does that. It's gonna be awesome. I really want this. Please don't be mad that I said yes. I know you don't hang out with your uncle, but his offer was so tempting. You wouldn't be mad if I worked at his clinic. Of course, John couldn't be mad at his wife who had such a glowing eye. A few months later, he reconciled with his uncle. They talked. They worked things out. They agreed to put the bad stuff behind them. And Emily took to her work with enthusiasm. She liked everything so much that she didn't even think about her past life in another city. It was here that she found peace and family. During this time, Emily had performed so many successful and complicated operations that she had already stopped counting them. She was now making more money than she ever thought possible. She and John hardly spent any money. They didn't need much. So every day her account was filled with a decent amount of money, and she had a lot of grateful clients. They not only paid for treatment and surgery, but also separately thanked the beautiful surgeon with golden hands, Emily. And no matter how not stubborn, and did not refuse the girl from money on her card, constantly received different amounts. No one gave her money in hand, because they knew that this doctor never takes anything from his patients. Emily was angry at first, but no matter how much she scolded the patients, everyone did their own thing. So then she just started doing charity work. She sent a portion of her money every month to orphanages and nursing homes. Everything was going well for Emily and her husband. But then something happened that made her involuntarily go back to a past she didn't want to remember. It happened in the winter. In the evening, Emily was about to leave the clinic. She looked out the window. It was snowing heavily, and she was thinking about whether to call a cab or drive her own car. It's snowing so hard, you can't get the dog outside. I can't drive in this weather. I'll leave the car in the parking lot and call a cab, Emily whispered. And then she leaned her forehead against the glass and squinted. Opposite the clinic was a small fast food cafe, which was in great demand. The place is good. The flow of people is constant. There were several benches next to the cafe, and on one of them some Emily figure could be seen. It seemed to be a woman because she was wearing a red long coat. Yes, that's right. The woman Emily saw had long hair of an indistinct shade of reddish color, it seemed. The woman caught Emily's attention because she was acting strangely. She sat with her hands in her pockets and swayed from side to side. Emily stared at her for several minutes. The snow started to fall harder, and the woman kept swaying. Emily was about to move away from the window when suddenly the woman collapsed on her side. "God, she's sick," Emily said quietly. She grabbed her coat and ran out of the study. Running past her sister, she shouted quickly to the orderly and the nurse to the street and the ceiling. "There's a man sick outside the cafe. Quickly." In a couple minutes, Emily was already near the woman. She regretted several times not wearing her boots with her medical rubber slippers. Several times she slipped and almost fell. The woman was unconscious. Emily felt for a pulse. It was clear. She breathed a sigh of relief. A couple minutes later, an orderly came running in with a stick, followed by a nurse. "Get her on a gurney and to the clinic. We're not going to do anything here." 5 minutes later, they were in the clinic. The nurse checked her blood pressure and gave her an injection with a medicine she called Emily. And after a couple minutes, the woman regained consciousness. Emily realized that the woman was just very cold and would have died there on the bench if Emily hadn't seen her. The woman was so cold she couldn't speak. The nurse brought her some hot tea. After a couple minutes, the woman was able to talk. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Her voice was so young that Emily was surprised that it was not a woman at all, but a girl of about 25. She also thought that she had met this girl somewhere before. She scrutinized her face. Suddenly, she was struck by a flash of memory. Camille said quietly to Emily. The girl dropped her head. She looked at Emily with a squint in her hands, holding the hot cup of tea trembling. "Yes, my name is Camille. Did the receptionist tell you about me?" Emily frowned at the receptionist. "Told you what? About me? I tried to make an appointment today, but I couldn't get an appointment. I begged the receptionist for someone to listen to me, but I was escorted out. I just sat there on the bench. And then I didn't care about anything." Emily didn't understand, but she decided to find out. "Go on, I'll sit with her and let her warm up. And then I'll decide what to do with her. And you are free to go home," she told the nurse. The nurse left. Emily looked at the closed door of the examination room. Then she said quietly to Camille, "Don't you remember me? My name is Emily." Camille frowned. She regarded Emily very carefully and muttered, "Emily, Emily, Emily, we're not ex-girlfriends." "No, Emily. Oh God, no. You're Stephen's ex-wife." "Neurosurgeon, yes." Emily nodded. And Camille cried, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you. I didn't know he was like that." "He was like that with you, wasn't he?" "God, why? I just got involved with him." She cried and cried until Emily gave her a sedative, and 10 minutes later, Camille was able to tell her everything. When Stephen and Emily divorced, Camille thought the up-and-coming surgeon would marry her, but Stephen was in no hurry to remarry. Yes, he promised Camille that he would marry, but only later. Camille told her father that Stephen was now her fiancé. Christopher, overjoyed, handed over his position to him. First, he made him his deputy. He brought him up to speed, and then he gave up the position himself. He recommended Stephen instead. He was appointed head of the clinic. Camille was living with Stephen by then. She was waiting for them to get married, but Stephen never set a date. And then suddenly her father died of a heart attack, and Camille was left all alone. She begged Stephen to marry her even more, and Stephen promised that they would marry after she helped him open a new clinic. Camille gave all her money from her father to her fiancé. He safely spent it all on opening the clinic and then resigned as the head doctor. And from the moment he took over his private plastic surgery clinic, he kicked Camille out the door. He said he didn't need her anymore, and he didn't owe her any money. She gave the money to charity, and he opened the clinic with his own money. Camille cried, sobbed, knelt, and crawled at his feet. She begged him not to leave her. But Stephen was like a beast. He pushed Camille away with his foot, looking at her as if she were a vile insect. He never loved anyone. Emily, not you, not me. He only loved himself. He only needed us for some purpose. He got rid of you, threw me out, took all my money. I was left on the street with nothing. I wasn't so scared and ashamed. I was afraid to go to the police in case he bought everything. I didn't have the money to go to court. I didn't know what to do. I called a friend. I gave her all my jewelry. She bought it all from me. I went to my cousin's house. She lives here in this town. That's how I live. Now she's running out of money. And then I started to feel bad. They found a small tumor in my head somewhere, and I tried to get a free operation. But there's a long waiting list at the hospital. I might not live to see the operation. And then my sister told me that this clinic does charity surgeries twice a month. I came here today to sign up for this free surgery, but I was told that there is a waiting list for several months ahead and that I need a consultation and counseling first. And even if I have an urgent situation, they won't do it before 2 months anyway. I will just die. I'm gonna die. God, there's nothing more I can do. And she cried again. Emily looked at her shudders and shoulders and thought about how fate had put everything in its place, and how this unfortunate person who had ruined her marriage was suffering now. Though here one might still wonder who really ruined her marriage. Stephen ruined it all by destroying everyone who was willing to do anything for him. He took advantage of everyone and never really loved or appreciated anyone. Camille fell silent. She stared at one point, occasionally sobbing. She no longer resembled at all the pretty girl who had grinned once upon a time. Looking at the humiliated Emily, her hair wasn't luxurious, booed over with glass bags. Without makeup, she looked like an ordinary unhappy girl. Stephen had hurt Emily and destroyed Camille by taking everything from her. And Emily had made a decision. Now I'm gonna call a cab and take you home. And tomorrow you'll come here with your story. You'll take everything you have. Come by 8 o'clock. Camille looked at her in surprise. Do you work here? You can arrange for me to be seen. Emily sighed and smiled slightly. Yes, I work here. And it's because of me that this clinic does free surgeries for people in need. And we have a really long waiting list. But tomorrow, I'll look at all your tests and diagnoses. I work from 900, but I'll be here at 8 to see you. Tell the receptionist to show you to my office. I'll make sure you don't get escorted out. I'll give you all the tests you need, and then I'll decide when to operate, if it's necessary. If it's an emergency, I'll schedule it as soon as possible. I'll make an exception with my superiors. You'll be scheduled for free surgery off the waiting list. In my own time, I will do everything in my power to help you. Camille shook her head in shock. That's impossible. Emily frowned. Why impossible? What do you mean? It's impossible. You can't help me. I did very bad things to you. I mocked you, called you names. You can't say you'll help me now. It's just not possible for me. It doesn't work that way. I hurt you. And you want to help me. I can't believe this can happen. Look, Camille, what's past is past. I don't hold a grudge. You may have done me a great favor to free me from Stephen. It's the only time I've had a real life without him and met wonderful people who respect and love me. I don't regret anything, and I'm sorry you had to endure all that. Stephen is a bad man. Believe me, he'll pay for everything he's done. But that's not what's important right now. I'm a doctor, and I help those who really need my help. I can see that you need my help. You used to say that I was working in a homeless shelter, and that I was stupid for operating on the poor and destitute. I guess I can answer that now. Yes, I'm probably an idiot, but I want to help you from the bottom of my heart, because I see and realize that no one else can help you, and I see that you're remorseful for your past actions as well. I'm sure that was a serious lesson for you, but I'm not going to punish you for anything. I just want you to have a chance to start over, because I had that chance. So show up tomorrow at 800 sharp, and we'll see what we can do with you from there. Now I gotta go home. I'm late enough as it is. My husband's waiting for me. Husband, I hope your husband loves and appreciates you very much, because I have never met a kinder and more unselfish man than you. Camille said quietly. Emily smiled. Yes, he does. He loves and appreciates me. And now you know that real doctors will never abandon a poor and destitute patient. Let's all go. The next day, Emily reviewed Camille's medical history and ordered the necessary tests. David authorized an extraordinary operation. He respected the wife of his favorite nephew and could not refuse her. The operation was scheduled for a week later. Camille met Emily just in time. One more month of delay, and the operation would have been impossible. Emily operated on the girl. The operation was a success. When Camille woke up and realized that all the worst was over, she was ready to kiss Emily's hands. But Emily realized that she was still not satisfied. She wanted to help the girl, so she started making inquiries about her ex-husband and the clinic he had opened with Camille's money. Emily hired a private investigator, and he arrived a week later with stunning news. Turns out Stephen was on the run. He'd been involved in drug and pharmaceutical fraud, buying illegal drugs that weren't certified. A lot of the drugs were obtained under the table. As they say, that's when the patients got in trouble. There were complaints. People were not feeling well after surgery. Many developed complications. Several patients were left disabled after plastic surgeries, and the complaints smoothly turned into subpoenas. Checks began, which revealed many inconsistencies. And when the truth came out, Stephen simply disappeared. They searched for him for months, but never found him. His clinic was on the verge of bankruptcy, so it was urgently put up for sale. And it was just a few days ago. Emily immediately realized what had to be done. She talked to her husband, told him the whole situation, and he supported the idea that came into his wife's head. Emily took a few days of vacation and left to put her idea into practice. 2 months later, Camille came to see Emily for an appointment. She was very nervous because she had undergone all kinds of examinations the week before, and today Emily had to tell her the verdict. Camille was afraid to hear what was in store for her. Even though the surgery had been a success, there's no telling what could have happened. Maybe Emily would tell her that everything was useless, that the tumor could not be removed completely, or that it had reappeared, and now the operation could not be done. Or maybe it could be done, but Emily wouldn't do it again, because this time it would have to be paid for, and Camille had no money. The girl sat under the office, clenching and clenching her fists. She felt that her palms were wet and hastily wiped them on her jeans. When would Emily call her? She couldn't wait for this to be over already. She just couldn't wait any longer. A nurse came out of Emily's office who was bringing in some paperwork. She smiled politely and said, "You can come in. Is the doctor expecting you?" Camille thought the nurse's smile was a good sign. But after a second, she thought that maybe the nurse was just feeling sorry for her, and she only had a couple of months to live. Camille giggled nervously and realized that it was urgent to find out the truth, or she would die right here. She walked into Emily's office and said a polite hello. "Hello, Emily." Emily smiled as she looked at Camille. "What else, Emily?" Stopping it, addressed each other by name. "Let it be. I'm just really scared." "Emily, aren't you scared of what you're about to say?" Emily's got a serious look on her face. "Okay, I won't torture you." "Camille, I have two pieces of news. One is good and one is bad." "Oh no, don't say the good one." "Tell me first, please," Camille interrupted her. Emily looked at her reproachfully. She wanted to say that the second news was very good, but Camille simply prevented her from doing so. "Well, let it be as she wants it to be. The good news is you're fine. You're going to live. You're great. The tumor was completely removed, and there's no trace of it. You're healthy, Camille." Camille was silent for a while with her mouth open, and then she cried. "Oh my God, Emily, you saved me. Thank you so much. How can I ever thank you? I don't know how I can thank you. You want me to work here for the rest of my life as a janitor, nurse, whatever. Just say the word. I'm ready. Thank you." And then Camille abruptly stopped talking. "And the second piece of news is that there's something bad." "Oh my God. What's the bad news? Did you find another tumor? Please tell me." Emily smiled sweetly at Camille, acting like a girl. "No, there's no tumor. Calm down. If you hadn't interrupted me from the beginning, you would have found out that the second news is good news too. Take a look at these files. This is the second piece of news." Emily handed Camille a folder with some documents. The girl looked at them apprehensively and then looked at Emily in amazement. "What? What does it mean? I don't understand." "Camille, you have your own plastic surgery clinic now. This clinic was bought with your money, so you own it." Camille stared at Emily in shock. She couldn't believe this was happening to her. Emily had bought back the clinic that Stephen had opened with Camille's money 2 months ago. It hadn't cost her very much because it had been put up for sale in a hurry. But in 2 months, Emily, with David's help, had managed to resuscitate it. And now Camille could slowly get into business and work. Emily was going to help her for the first time to teach her everything and explain how to run all the businesses, and Camille would do well. Emily was sure of that. "You can just sell it if you want." No, I want to keep this business going. I know I can. God, I can't believe this is happening to me. Why are you helping me so much? I don't understand why you have so much kindness in you. I'll give you everything. When I make money, I'll pay you back everything you spent on me. I promise you that. I've never met anyone like you, Emily. I never will. You brought me back to life. You gave me a second chance. I'll never forget that." They talked for another half hour or so. Camille was prepared for a lot of work, but she wanted it with all her soul and longed to get started as soon as possible. Before she left, they hugged like best friends, and Emily realized she had no regrets. She had done the right thing. She had done everything right. She was standing looking out the window when her cell phone rang. "Yes, honey, will you come get me?" "Oh, great. I have something I have to tell you. Let's have lunch at home tonight." "Oh, that's great. Order something from the restaurant and then come over." No, I'm not telling you anything right now. You'll find out tonight." "Yeah, that's great news. Kisses." Emily turned off her cell phone and smiled. Tonight she would tell her husband that she was pregnant, and he would be very happy. She was sure of it. She looked out the window again. How wonderful life was. How wonderful that her life had turned out this way. She was so happy, and she wanted everyone to be happy. How much more there was to do, and Emily knew that only the best and most wonderful things were ahead of her.